This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. WrestleMania history is littered with awful matches that are not worthy of being on the grandest stage of them all. I've left out matches like Akabono vs The Big Show and Michael Cole vs Jerry Lawler. I'm probably going to include those novelty matches in a separate list all of their own. So here we go. These are the 25 worst matches in WrestleMania history. At WrestleMania 9, against the backdrop of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, The Undertaker faced off against Giant Gonzalez. When these men stood toe-to-toe against each other, it was certainly visually striking, but the match itself was absolutely atrocious. Gonzalez was one of the few men on the roster to tower over The Undertaker, but it was impossible to take him seriously wearing an airbrushed bodysuit. The Undertaker was the one who was supposed to be the stuff of nightmares. He was the dead man after all, but in the end, that accolade went to Gonzalez and that awful bodysuit. This was just one of many matches at WrestleMania 9 that contributed to it once being called the worst WrestleMania of all time. WrestleMania 27's main event featured John Cena challenging The Miz for the WWE Championship. Nobody was buying The Miz as a proper main eventer back in 2011, and him being WWE Champion looks even more ridiculous now when we look back at it. This match was barely worth a Raw main event, let alone the main event of the biggest show of the year. Ultimately, this match was trash, and the only redeeming feature was that it set up The Rock vs Cena for WrestleMania 28, which was a match worthy of the main event. WrestleMania 2 was an ambitious event that spanned 3 different locations, each with their own main event, but Hogan vs King Kong Bundy was the ultimate headliner. It was a steel cage match which should have added extra drama to the situation, but it didn't. Even King Kong Bundy bleeding didn't make this contest any more exciting. It was a slow, boring match, and even though Bundy broke Hogan's ribs in the build-up, he just didn't feel like a credible threat to Hulkamania. WrestleMania 28 featured one of the most disappointing World Heavyweight Championship matches in wrestling history. Daniel Bryan was the champion going into this match with Sheamus, and despite him being a heel at the time, the fans had already started falling in love with him. The 78,000 fans in Sun Life Stadium popped big time when his music played. Nobody expected this to be the opening match, and everyone expected it to be an absolute barn burner. But it wasn't to be. The abrupt conclusion came after a pre-match kiss between Bryan and AJ Lee, followed by Sheamus hitting the Brogue Kick, ending Bryan's title reign in an instant. And it was a really terrible way to start the show. Bam Bam Bigelow teamed up with Luna Vachon to wrestle Doink and Dink at WrestleMania 10 in 1994. If anything proves that Vince McMahon was always a psychopath, then just look at his idea of comedy. And Bam Bam Bigelow deserved far better than to be involved in this kind of nonsense. He was one of wrestling's best ever big men, and he was mostly misused while he was in the WWF. Thankfully, they kept this match short at just 6 minutes, and rightfully, Bam Bam was the one to pick up the win. Let's hope there are no lame matches at this year's WrestleMania, which is just around the corner. WrestleMania 40 will be available on Peacock in the United States, but if you're going to be out of the country, then Surfshark VPN, the sponsor of today's video, is your answer. With Surfshark, you cloak your online presence so you can browse, stream, and engage with content securely and without giving away your location or identity. Surfshark encrypts your internet connection, shielding your personal data from those lurking in the depths of the digital arena. It's like putting on a mask so you can keep your online actions a mystery, and you can use your subscription on an unlimited amount of devices, whether it's preventing ISPs from throttling your bandwidth during a premium live event or safeguarding your sensitive information on public Wi-Fi. Surfshark ensures that your online activity stays private and unrestricted. Use my code STUNNED for an extra 3 months free. There's a link down in the description. Bray Wyatt defended his WWE Championship against Randy Orton at WrestleMania 33. Luckily, this wasn't the main event, and thank goodness for that. This was during that tedious period where they'd run out of ideas for Bray Wyatt, and so they moved away from the cult leader character and made him some sort of horror movie villain instead. Instead of allowing the men to just have a straight up wrestling match, they tried to turn up the spooky stuff by projecting maggots and insects onto the mat. This was supposed to represent Wyatt's mind games in his contest with Orton, but in the end, fans were left bored and confused. Despite all of the spooky shenanigans, Orton overcame the odds and won the match and the belt. At WrestleMania 7, Jake Roberts faced Rick the Model Martel in a blindfold match. The story going in was centered around Martel blinding Roberts with his perfume brand Arrogance during a segment on the Brother Love show. The blindfold match was designed to level the playing field, forcing Martel to experience the blindness that he had inflicted upon Roberts. If you watch the match as it went out on pay-per-view, as the referee puts the blindfold on Jake, you can see him push his fingers through the mesh eye holes, and once you've seen that, your suspension of disbelief is completely broken. And even if you didn't see that, once the novelty of the gimmick wears off, this is just two men stumbling around each other for 8 minutes, pretending they can't see each other. Triple H vs Randy Orton at WrestleMania 25 is a match that was massively overshadowed by its build-up. After winning the Royal Rumble, Orton went on a campaign of attacking the McMahon family, taking them out one by one. WWE Champion Triple H was enraged by this, and Orton agreed to use his title shot against him at WrestleMania. In one incredibly well-produced segment, Triple H invaded Orton's home with a sledgehammer in hand. But on the night, the match at WrestleMania was a massive letdown, and in the end, Triple H retained the title, which was totally the wrong decision. In 1999, the WWF's women's division wasn't exactly known for its technical brilliance. In fact, it barely existed. And so they made the most popular woman on the roster the women's champion, despite her only knowing about 5 wrestling moves, and then they decided to turn her heel. In the lead up to WrestleMania 15, Tori had been introduced as Sable's biggest fan. Sable made it very clear that she was not into that at all, and so this match was made official. The match itself was atrocious. There were lots of botches, and it was clear that neither of these women really knew what they were doing. And because of Sable's heel turn, the match had no heat at all. The fans had no reason to care about Tori as the babyface because they barely knew who she was, and they didn't really want to boo Sable, they wanted to cheer for her. The Big Show and A-Train versus The Undertaker was a handicap match at WrestleMania 19, and it was a very odd bit of booking indeed. Everyone had high hopes for Nathan Jones. In early 2003, the man looked like a total beast with a legitimate tough guy background, and the original plan was for him to tag team with The Undertaker here at WrestleMania. But Vince McMahon apparently decided that Jones was far too green for that role, and so he was removed from the match at the last minute. This handicap match is what we ended up with. Just a totally forgettable encounter. Nathan Jones did make an appearance at the end of the match to help The Undertaker pin the Big Show. Out of all of The Undertaker's WrestleMania matches, this one is definitely in the bottom 3. When Ric Flair won the 1992 Royal Rumble, he became WWF Champion, and many fans expected the dream match of Flair vs Hogan to be the main event of WrestleMania 8, but the story goes that Vince McMahon lost faith in Flair as a WrestleMania main eventer and decided to go with the tried and tested formula of putting Hogan in the main event against a monster heel. And this match between Hogan and Sid Justice was absolute trash, and easily one of the worst WrestleMania main events on this list. These two had zero chemistry in the ring, and the finish was a total mess. Papa Shango was supposed to interfere, but he managed to botch that, and the whole thing ended on a disqualification. The only real excitement came from the Ultimate Warriors running at the end. Chavo Guerrero faced Kane for the ECW Championship at WrestleMania 24. Guerrero went in as the champion, but this was 2008 and the ECW brand had become WWE's C-Show, so the title was basically worthless. Kane won a battle royal on the kickoff show earlier in the night to determine the #1 contender, and he destroyed Guerrero in just 11 seconds here to win the title. WrestleMania 32 was a drag to sit through, with the main event serving as the stale bread to the shit sandwich. This was in 2016 and Roman Reigns was being rejected as the babyface hero of the company. To say the fans hated him in this role would be an understatement. The build-up to this match was boring and predictable, with Triple H winning the WWE Championship in the Royal Rumble match in January, and the contest here at WrestleMania was also boring and predictable, with Reigns winning in the end. There had been 80,000 fans in the stadium, but many of them voted with their feet and headed for the parking lot before the match had even started. Considering WrestleMania 15 took place in 1999 at the height of the Attitude Era, it's surprising how poor this show was, and this Hell in a Cell match between The Undertaker and the Big Boss Man was no exception. The build-up was nonsense, as it was that time when The Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness was battling against the corporation and everyone involved seemed to be a heel. The match itself was just a whole lot of kicking and punching before Taker got the inevitable win. Then, in a spot that was even ridiculous for the Attitude Era, he hung the Big Boss Man from the cell roof. This went down as one of the worst Hell in a Cell matches to ever take place. It was a real waste of the gimmick at a time when it was still something special. The Miss WrestleMania Divas match at WrestleMania 25 shows just how far women's wrestling has come. This battle royal featured female wrestlers from all three WWE brands at the time. The idea was to celebrate the history and diversity of the women's division by crowning a Miss WrestleMania. But then WWE decided to turn it into an absolute joke by dressing Santino Marella in drag and introducing him as Santina Marella. This was about as funny as a Triple H promo from 2003. And of course, they decided to have Santina win the damn thing. WrestleMania 4 was an absolute mess. The entire show was based around a one-night tournament to find a new WWF champion, but none of the tournament matches got more than 10 minutes, not even the final match between Randy Savage and Ted DiBiase. The matches themselves were rushed and messy, and Bam Bam Bigelow versus the one-man gang was the worst of the bunch. It could have been a really good clash between two super heavyweights, but this first round match was done in less than 3 minutes due to a countout. The match demonstrates how the WWF totally wasted Bam Bam Bigelow's talents throughout his career, including here very early on in 1988. Brock Lesnar vs Goldberg from WrestleMania 20 is one of the most infamous matches in WrestleMania history. Both Goldberg and Lesnar were leaving the company after the match, with Goldberg's contract expiring and Lesnar departing to pursue a career in the NFL. And this wasn't a secret. The smart fans in attendance that night at Madison Square Garden were very well aware of this fact. The only superstar involved to get a good ovation from the crowd was Stone Cold, who was the special guest referee. As the fans booed on, Goldberg pinned Lesnar before getting a well-deserved stunner for his efforts. I'm trying to remember whether we were still calling Vince McMahon a genius in 2007. I don't think we were. A genius certainly wouldn't have booked this match between Kane and the Great Khali at WrestleMania 23. This one was billed as a SmackDown vs Raw interpromotional match, with Khali representing Raw and Kane representing SmackDown. And I guarantee that not one of the 74,000 people in attendance gave a solitary shit about it. Luckily, they kept it short, with Khali picking up the win after 5.5 minutes. Women's wrestling in WWE really was a struggle to sit through back in 2005, and this match between Christy Hemme and Trish Stratus for the Women's Championship was classic bathroom break material. Hemme was the Diva Search winner from the year before, and she was most famous at this point for posing nude in Playboy, so she was utterly clueless when it came to wrestling. There were lots of lame-looking punches and kicks before Trish got the win. The Undertaker versus Roman Reigns is a contender for the worst WrestleMania main event of all time. WrestleMania 33 took place in Orlando, and 65,000 fans were on hand to witness these two men embarrassing themselves. The story going into this one was due to a disagreement between the men as to whose yard the WWE was, or some similar nonsense. The match itself was a botch fest, and it was clear that The Undertaker was now years past his prime. At the time, it looked like this was going to be The Undertaker's final match, his retirement, and that's what made this really sad to see. WrestleMania 9 was trash, but there was some hope for the main event. It was Bret Hart versus Yokozuna for the WWF Championship. By putting the belt on Hart, it seems that Vince McMahon was focusing on the new generation of wrestlers rather than relying on his old 80s superstars. And this main event seemed to prove that was true. Yokozuna won the match after throwing salt in Hart's eyes and became the new WWF champion. But that wasn't the end of the show. Hulk Hogan marched down to the ring. Apparently, he was coming down to check on Hart's condition, but ended up in a match with Yokozuna. Hogan hit the leg drop for the 3 count to once again be crowned the champion. It seemed that Vince McMahon wasn't quite ready to put his faith in the new generation just yet. WrestleMania 36 was one of the strangest shows of all time. It was held in 2020 during the COVID pandemic, and so both nights took place in an empty arena. But COVID also had another effect on the show. The planned match between Goldberg and Roman Reigns could no longer go ahead because Reigns had health concerns related to the pandemic. Braun Strowman was announced as Reigns' replacement at the last minute, leaving us with a match that nobody cared about. The match itself was for the Universal Championship, and after some sloppy looking power moves, Strowman beat Goldberg and won the belt. It was one of the most worthless high profile matches in WrestleMania history, but at least it wasn't the main event. The Bushwhackers, Luke and Butch, took on the Fabulous Rougeaus, Jacques and Raymond, at WrestleMania 5. As always with the Bushwhackers, their comedy might appeal to you if you're 5 years old, but they offer nothing to adult fans. WrestleMania 5 was decent. It featured plenty of great matches, but some of them were just too short. They'd have been better getting rid of this one to give those other matches a bit more breathing room. It's the feud that felt like it would never end. Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar was Vince McMahon's Clash of the Titans, and back in 2018, we were right in the middle of it. WrestleMania 34 played host to this main event for the Universal title, with Lesnar going in and coming out as the champion. They'd previously faced each other at WrestleMania 31, and while that match was better than this one, it still wasn't great, but it was saved by the most memorable Money in the Bank cash-in of all time, thanks to Seth Rollins. But nothing could save us from this 16-minute bore-fest, with both men spamming their finishing moves to the point where they meant nothing. This is when everyone was sick of babyface Roman Reigns, and Lesnar's role of WWE's final boss was well and truly played out. When Bret Hart left the WWF in 1997, he was so badly hurt by the Montreal Screwjob, it seemed that he would never step foot back in the company. But over time, the rift started to heal. He entered the Hall of Fame in 2006, and he signed a talent contract with WWE in late 2009. And so they decided to run a storyline between him and Vince McMahon. And the fans were totally into it. It honestly felt like hell had frozen over to even see Hart back on TV, let alone see him in the ring, face to face with Vinnie Mac. And there were a lot of fans out there hoping to see Bret absolutely destroy Vince. But we knew that he was going to be limited in what he could do in the ring due to his concussion. But we didn't realise that he was going to be this limited. Out of all the matches in WrestleMania history, this is the one that was rooted in the most real-life animosity, a match that we never thought we'd be able to see, and by the end of it, I wish we'd never seen it. So, those are my picks for the 25 worst matches in WrestleMania history. Do you agree with my choices? Let me know down in the comments, and remember to check out this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Click the link in the description and use my code STUNNED for an extra 3 months free.